Good afternoon to one and all present here.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It, it takes me immense pleasure to welcome you all to the online lecture series as presented by Intersections B.H.U, which is an informal academic platform under the aegis of Faculty of Arts, Banaras Hindu University. The purpose of this online lecture series is to address young minds of scholars, academicians, and mostly PG students and bring about an awareness of the recent and ongoing studies in the sphere of academics. Today, we have among us an esteemed speaker, Professor Lakshmi Raj Sharma, who is a professor of English at the University of Allahabad. His multicultural novel, The Tailor's Needle, is published by Penguin Books India in 2012. His first story collection, Marriages Are Made in India, is published by Publerati, USA in 2012. His second story collection, Intriguing Women, is published by the Paris Press under the White Glove scheme, London, in February 2016. He has published several short stories in American journals and papers. His latest fiction book, the novella Saba Nisha, a love story, was published in September 2017 to work as an ad or giveaway for We Should Not All Be Feminists, his forthcoming novel. He has published a number of academic books, the chief of which is the T.S. Eliot-Middleton Murry Debate 1994. Among his best published articles are Charles Dickens and Me, published in the Oxford Journal English, and one on Thomas Hardy's poetry, published in the Hardy Society Journal, UK. So, without further delay, I, on behalf of Intersections Banaras Hindu University, welcome you, sir. Before we begin, I have a few requests for the participants. Participants are requested to put their questions in the chat box. All the questions will be attended in the question-answer session, which shall be conducted post-lecture. The questions shall be read out by me in a chronological order. I also humbly request all the participants to mute themselves and not to share their screen. Thank you. Once again, I welcome you, sir.
Thank you very much, Lakshmi, for having me over at the intersection event. I will be speaking on creative writing, and I hope that I will be able to give you a slight idea of what creative writing is, because it's a very big field and it's quite a vague field, so putting it all together in a very organized form is not very possible. Though some people do try to put it on the internet in a very organized form. What I will say today is that, first of all, I'm very grateful to Intersection, B.H.U. Varanasi for having me over. And then I would like to say, I would like to talk about creative writing on the basis of what I consider creative writing to be. So, when you are creative, you are also critical. You may be critical within yourself because it is that critical aspect of your personality which is somewhere linked with your creativity. You must understand and you must also impute. These are the two different aspects of creative writing. First of all, I would like to tell you about the word creative. The word creative is linked with the creator. The creator, whoever that is, of this world, has created this world out of nothing. Where there was nothing, there is a world. And it has been for some millions of years. So the creative writer also creates a world out of his imagination or her imagination. Out of nothing, a whole world is created. And this is where a creative writer or anyone who's creative in any sphere is different to the average individual. Because the creative mind does not look at the real world as it actually is. Realists claim that they create the world or an object as it actually is. But that is not true. No one can ever create the world as it actually is because the world is far too complex to be reproduced. So, what does the creative mind do? The creative mind actually turns the eyes away from the reality as it actually is. And then the eyes are fixed on the reality as it is intuited, as it is intuitively grasped. The world is there in its real form before the writer, but the writer chooses to see not only the surface reality of the world, but to go deeper beyond the surface. There are crevices, gaps, which the world has. And the creative writer's vision penetrates into those crevices and brings out from there the reality that the creative writer considers to exist. Now, this reality can be called an average of what is seen on the surface of this world or of life, and as it is seen by the creative vision that uh, penetrates beyond the surface. So there is a some kind of average which is achieved by the creative writer. Now, let me tell you that everyone, whether academic, not academic, whether uh, you know very distinguished or not distinguished, whether very well placed in society or not very well placed in society, everyone has the potential to be a creative writer. There is a creative dimension in everyone, and it is possible for everyone to awaken that creative dimension and bring it forward. But there are some who manage to bring it forward very well, and there are some who do not manage to bring out the creativity within themselves that well. So they never ultimately become very creative. The number of people who become creative, I think, is very small compared to those who never ultimately manage to become creative. But I think the imagination is a very essential part of being creative, and the creative writer must be gifted by a wonderful imagination. If he is not, or if she is not gifted by that kind of imagination, then he or she will need to develop that kind of imagination with the help of reading a lot, with the help of seeing a lot of the world, observing the world very minutely in solitude, and taking in a lot of the world that is there outside. You know, as I said, there is a creative writer in everyone. Imagine a woman in the village who does not know how to read or write, but she's also a human being. She also has the creative faculty in her. And because she has the creative faculty in her, therefore, she can also be creative. When she sings a song, which comes from her heart for her lover, like Mohan Lal Humke, Sitara Jason Chanke. When she sings a song of that type, she is being creative because she is comparing the one she likes with a star, the one who's called Mohan Lal shines like a star for her. So the creative object, or the object which fascinates the creative writer, gets an added sheen or shine on it for the creative writer. And the creative writer then begins to get lured by that object. And when this writer gets lured by the object, the writer dies in the real world and wakes up in another world which is sort of cut off from the real world. And this world only has some parts of the real world. And most of the parts are created by the writer or his imagination or her imagination. Whatever is created is half perceived and half created. Half is seen and the other half is created by the imagination. S.T. Coleridge has told us about the reconciliation of opposites. The creative imagination of a writer is able to reconcile opposites. It can see life in death, death in life. It can see day in night, night in day. It can see youth in age, age in youth. So this imagination has the capacity to reconcile opposites. And this capacity is what the creative writer has. So those who consider themselves creative and believe that they are realists are actually perhaps deceiving themselves because they may be able to manage a little more of imitation of the real world. But actually, that kind of imitation will always be limited. And the imagination will always play a role. Now, the scientist, you know, looks at the universe rationally to a large extent. And the creative writer looks at it emotionally. So the scientist is very different to the creative writer. Both are doing very valid kind of work. But one is looking at the world very rationally and believing that he is understanding everything that the world is projecting before him. But the fact is that he is only understanding the world, you know, in a limited sense. And he is trying to explain it denotatively with a language which has only one layer of meaning with an unambiguous language. So this unambiguity in science, you know, is a mistaken notion that they know everything. But if that were true, then newer scientific theories would not disprove the older ones. The creative writer, on the other hand, looks at the world emotionally. He gets involved with it emotionally. And when he looks at an object or at an incident, he actually looks at it with the whole universe behind him. This means that he never looks at the world only personally. So he does look at it very personally. Even then, he has the universe behind whatever he's looking at. Therefore, there is some impersonality also, which comes into his perception. Because as I said, when the writer writes, when he is creating, he actually dives into another kind of life. He wakes up into another kind of life. So his physical personality, his own personality, this world in which he lives, seems to shut down for him. And he wakes up into another world in which he is not only himself or herself, but they are much more than that. Now I will tell you something about what happens when I sit and write. I first of all I get something in my mind in a flash. Something comes to me in a flash. Sometimes it is the plot of the novel, a very vague, bare kind of plot of the novel, which flashes upon my mind. And sometimes it is only the beginning of a novel or a story or a novella or a play which flashes upon my mind. And then I sit at my computer and I start typing. My conscious mind works for a few sentences, and after that, I forget that I'm typing. My fingers continue to type. And after a long time, I come back to the real world, when I've written quite a bit. And then I try to read what I have written, and I'm sometimes very surprised how I could have written such a thing, because I had never consciously thought of what I was going to write exactly. So, there is something unconscious about the writing process which comes on into operation. And this is what I would like every writer to know. This will lead me to the next point soon after I finish this. which is called the voice of a writer. I will talk about that later. But first, let me tell you about this unconscious part of writing. We grow up from childhood, and every day, every minute, every month, every year, something or the other keeps entering our minds through our senses, through our five senses. Most of what enters the mind settles down somewhere and it lies cold and low for a long time till such a moment when it suddenly enters the conscious mind and you want to talk about it. Now, when I write, I find that I have used certain words which are not in my conscious vocabulary, but I've used them in my creative writing. Now, how does that happen? That has happened because maybe 20 years or 25 years ago, I had read this word and found out its meaning. And then it has lain in my memory and never come into the forefront. But now it has come when the need is arisen. So, in the case of a writer, the subconscious mind always keeps getting connected with the conscious mind and keeps supplying to the conscious mind what is most needed at that moment. Whether it is an image, whether it is a metaphor, whether it is a symbol, whether it is a kind of rhythm which will help the author to convey the thought better, whether it is some kind of alliteration, or whether it is some kind of figure of speech which is needed at that moment. The subconscious mind will be like a friend to the conscious mind of the author and will always keep supplying what is needed by the conscious mind. So, what is actually happening to the writer is that the conscious mind has got shut and got connected with the subconscious or unconscious mind. And it is that which is now working. So the conscious mind doesn't even know what is happening. And it is the unconscious mind which is perfectly connected with the conscious mind. Now, I would like to tell you something about the voice of an author. The voice of the author is the inner author, the inner author, as she or he is. The self of the author coming out through metaphors, images, symbols, rhythms, alliteration, or assonances, dissonances, any kind of literary devices. So, what exactly is the voice? The voice is something inner. T.S. Eliot said that he had no inner voice. He was inner deaf. He could never hear his inner voice. But remember that T.S. Eliot was a strategist of a very high order. He could always give very impressive statements about his inner self by confusing the world more than explaining things. T.S. Eliot, I believe, is a very great critical mind of the 20th century. And I have learned a great deal about creativity from him. And maybe what I tell you in some part of this lecture will not be what I have learned on my own, but what I have learned from him. Because he has always influenced the way I have thought. But for the time being, let us think of what the voice is. T.S. Eliot says that the poet should be able to find the right symbols, the right objects to convey what he has felt within. And he gives it the term objective to relative. When the poet is able to convey his mood, his inner vision, by finding the right objects in the outside world. Now, this is actually the voice of an author. That means bringing out from within and giving to the reader who's outside the writer, whatever has been felt by the writer from within. But as I said, the voice has what is called a connection between the conscious and the unconscious. In fact, there is an analogy which has been used. You know, it has been called the relationship between the subconscious mind and the conscious mind has been compared with a horse rider and a horse. The horse is the conscious mind who is doing what the horse rider is telling the horse to do, which is the subconscious mind. And the two are very well connected. There is a word called trueness. I'm putting it in inverted commas. Trueness. There is a trueness between the subconscious and the conscious. Just as in the case of the horse rider and the horse, this trueness is called dressage. What is dressage? Dressage is that connection between the horse and the horse rider. When the horse rider gives it a slight indication, the horse knows what it is to do. It follows exactly what the horse rider wants it to do. This connection is between the subconscious mind and the conscious mind of a creative writer. So the voice of the writer is actually coming from the subconscious mind and it's being given to the conscious mind, which is doing the writing, perhaps unknowingly. Well, the voice, very often can be put into a character of a novel or a story or a play. It can be put into one of the characters who will then start speaking like or something like the author. Sometimes the writer may not want the reader to know that this is his own voice. In that case, he will wear a mask. He will create a character that is very unlike his own or her own self and speak in that character. So, the voice, you know, is a very important thing in writing. And if you are students of literature, you must try to ask yourselves, is this the author saying something himself or herself? Or is he or she saying it through a mask? Or are they totally detached from the self? And is this not the voice of the author? There can be a novel which is not written in the voice of an author. Like, a murder mystery. Is normally not in the voice of an author unless it is a work of literary fiction, in which there is also a murder mystery. If the murder mystery is a secondary aspect of the novel, then the voice can come to the front. Then the author will show everything. Scientist, the author brings out this inner self or whatever the author has observed and presents it in several layers of meaning. And the reader has to work hard to get into those layers of meaning because this is something creative, it is not ordinary. What is creative cannot be understood very easily. Because as Shakespeare has said, that the lunatic, the lover, and the poet are of imagination, all compact. They are all similar. Now, it is very easy to say such a thing, but what does it mean? It means that the writer is very much like a lunatic, first of all. It is difficult to understand what a lunatic wants to say. Because the lunatic maybe has more thoughts at one moment than a sane man does or a woman does. So that lunatic is trying to carry out what the subconscious is doing for him, in a very fractured manner. And it doesn't know how to follow the commands of the subconscious very consciously. So he is running about laughing and crying and yelling and smiling all at the same time. That is what the lunatic does. Now, that means that the lunatic is dead to the real world. His conscious mind is closed. This is what Shakespeare may have meant when he said that the poet is like the lunatic, because both of them keep their conscious minds closed. Now, as far as the lover is concerned, the lover also closes his or her conscious mind. Because for the lover, the beloved is the most beautiful thing in the world. Everyone considers the beloved to be the most beautiful creature in the world. It is said that Layla was a very ugly woman, and yet Majnu thought that she was the most beautiful. Why did Majnu think that Layla was the most beautiful? Because Majnu's conscious mind was closed, and he looked at her with an inner eye that made him see differently. So the lover falls in love because the mind is shut while an extra eye is open, which sees something that is not actually there, which is not really present. But only part of what is really present is seen, and most of what is seen is imagined by the lover. Similarly, the writer also does the same thing. He only sees partly, and the rest he creates with his imagination. That is why there is so much fulfillment for the moment or momentary fulfillment in love. Why? Because at the moment one is in love, deeply in love with someone, at that time all the disagreeables of the world evaporate. Because the reality of this ugly world cannot be seen at that moment. Only the most wonderful things are allowed to come in, are allowed to filter in by the imagination. So, if the lover tells his beloved, "Chalo dildar chalo, chand ke paar chalo," something which is impossible, the beloved says, "Hum hai tayar chalo." Now, what does this mean? This means that the mind of the lover and the mind of the beloved, both of them are lovers, has been closed. And so the real world is not there. They are ready to step into an unreal world and go to whatever extent, because the imagination is working while They are dead in the real world and they have acquired a kind of impersonality. Now, I would say that the best style of a creative writer comes when a writer is able to combine the maximum personality, his or her maximum personality, with the maximum of impersonality. When both these aspects come very well together, then the creative thing becomes excellent. All right? So remember that creative writing is an outlet or self-expression. Creative writing is an outlet for self-expression. It is anything which is not academic or technical. Wherever academics comes in and wherever narrative techniques also as critics, then we are more critical than critics. Of course, some critical, ability is needed in creativity. Without that, no one can be creative. But in order to be fully creative, one needs to be, you know, dead to the absolute critical world. T.S. Eliot said that the best writer of poetry, the best critic of poetry, is the poet. Now, we do not know whether he said this because of the strategies which he was interested in to take him higher into the critical world, or whether he said that because he actually felt that. When a writer is both critic and creative, then what he said in his criticism may be very true, but maybe there because of his need to build critical theories or literary theories. And sometimes those theories won't match exactly with creative practice. So whenever you read something of a theorist, then you know that those may be very true, but not entirely true. Nothing is entirely true. We know because of Derrida and so many other, recent writers, that meaning is fluid. Nothing is very stable that can be understood. So even the meaning in critical theories is not as stable as it claims to be. Now, when a person wishes to write a novel, he has to be a realist of some sort in the sense that he must do a lot of research first to find out about the setting that he is using for his novel or short story. He must know a lot. That is one thing that he must do. He must know what he is writing. But that knowledge is there before is necessary for the time before he starts writing. That must just be shoved into his subconscious mind. After that, he needs to distort that reality to suit his plots, to suit the plotting of a poem or the plotting of a play or the plotting of a novel or a story. Reality has to be there in the background, but the plotting has to be very important. In literature, the plot is a very, very significant thing. That is why Aristotle is such an important theorist for literature, because he gives so much importance to plot. Now, I'm not talking about the plot as Aristotle perceived, but I'm talking about it as I think it is important for creative writing. What is the plot? The plot is an artistic arrangement of the events of a creative text. And the story has to be rearranged, or the experience has to be rearranged. Whatever the writer has experienced in the form of the coming of the story has to be rearranged into a plot, into another order of events, which make it artistic. So, in a plot, the author is always present. This is a very important aspect of plot. If the author is not present in the plot, then it will not be a creative text. But the presence of the author need not be very personal, it can be very impersonal. The point of view of the author has to always be there. Either you will put it through a mask, indirectly through a character, or you will talk about it directly. In a dramatic monologue, he can make a character say something indirectly that he wants to criticize or support. So, but in a lyric, a poem will say something more directly. So the plot is constructed according to the need of the text or the needs of the text. So after doing research, the author has to, become very imaginative and creative. And that creation is actually what is called the plotting, laying bare the experience of the author. Experience is a very significant part of poetry and also, to some extent, of fiction. Now, when an author becomes creative, he begins to show things rather than say them. The conscious mind says things, makes statements rationally, but the subconscious mind tends to show them with the help of dialogue, with the help of images, metaphors, symbols. Things are shown rather than stated. According to Ludwig Wittgenstein, what can be shown cannot be stated. That means that when we show something, when we present something to you in a visual form or in an auditory form or in some sensory form, then that will be real than merely telling you about it. Telling is not enough. Showing is important. In every poem, in every short story, novella, or novel, there is some kind of telling also, but that telling is very, very limited. Mainly, it is showing because that is what draws the reader in. The reader is drawn to the moment of creation when he enters the world that is being shown. So that is very important, showing something. Never saying it, but merely showing it. Alright? So, plotting includes showing. And it is linked with another very significant aspect of creation, particularly of the novel and short story, and that is characterization. In literature, people are created. And these can be either types, having just one quality, or a little more than one quality visible in them, or they can be very rounded or very multifaceted, and they can be, much more than than people with a single visual, feature in them. So characters are often given a lot of layers by the creator, and like the meaning of a text, the meaning of a character too has multi layers, and you are supposed to, you know, penetrate through those layers of a character. Hamlet, you know, has so many layers because he is at one level a student, at another level an intellectual, at another level a lover of art, at another level a son of a mother that he really loves. At another level, he is a sword fencer and a lover of life. These are so many aspects of Hamlet. There must be many more than what I have shown you. But you have to penetrate into so many aspects to come to some conclusion about what Hamlet means to you. Hamlet will never be finally understood, maybe, because people will see him differently because of the various levels of meaning in the character of Hamlet. So the creative writer puts several layers of meaning into his characters, and therefore characterization is very important. Characters are not just names, they are not just single qualities, they are sometimes fully developed individuals. T.S. Eliot said that even type characters who have just one visible quality can be very rich because he created that kind of characters in most of his case. But that does not mean that rounded characters are of less importance. I think they are of much more importance because a rounded character will have the capacity to evolve, to become a different person from what he started, and that is what makes him like a real human being. That is what makes him resemble like a real human being. So characterization is very important. And ultimately, I will just tell you one more thing. That of course creativity is much more than what I have told you. But for the successful creative writer, what is needed is publication. And today's publishing industry makes it very difficult for you to enter into the publishing world in a very big manner, with a bang, as it is said. There are very few very successful writers in this world. They can be counted on your fingertips. And to enter into the list of those very successful ones is very difficult. The publishing industry does not allow everyone to be called very creative. So you must write for your own pleasure rather than for the pleasure of the world. So you must have an audience in mind when you write. You must think of who you are addressing, because otherwise you won't be able to keep your text focused. You must have a clear-cut audience in front of you. But ultimately, if you want to be published, there is a certain monster called the publishing industry that you have to defeat before you ultimately become a published creative writer. You know, I wrote I wrote this book, which is called The Tailor's Needle. The Tailor's Needle. This was published by Penguin Books India in 2012. But you will be surprised to know that when I sent the manuscript by email to Penguin Books India, they returned it to me within 2 days, saying that they did not find it suitable for them. So I was very disheartened, and I ultimately sent it to a publisher in England who wrote back after 10 days that she thought that this novel would be her dream fulfillment because she wanted an Indian author's novel for her publishing house, and this was the one she wanted. And so she quickly published it. But unfortunately, soon as she published it, just before she died, she published it, and very soon after she died, but before she published it, she sold it to Penguin India. And because she sold it to Penguin India, therefore, today this book is known as a book published by Penguin India. So you know that the publishing industry is very strange. It is difficult to please them. But once you become successful, then they also start believing in you, and then things become easier. So I have written, another book which has been published in England. This is called Intriguing Women, about which you can see some videos on the. I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry that the internet went off or something happened because of which I wasn't heard. Um, I would just like to tell about my second book, or rather book of fiction, which is called Intriguing Women, which was published through my literary agent in London. Intriguing Women. You see some news on the internet of intriguing. That short story.
कि आप कंटिन्यू करना है कि नहीं क्योंकि स्पीकर अटक रहा है ना
I am big influenced by this book is called Intriguing. Alright, so the third book which I have this here is Saba and Nisha, another story which you might like to read. And my fourth book was published in America. It is called Marriages Are Made in India. It is an e-book. So you can get that free of cost by coming to my website. To click
खंडन
you
हो
able
गया
to free of that
उसके घर पे जो है
this
घर पे
was
उसकी
the
बहन जो उसको बोली होगी
and received it so like but the after that I did I should say the so and I'm again very thankful to Dickens finding me of
Thank you, sir, for your thought provoking talk. We have one question by Ankita Basak. Sir, what are some platforms that allow young new poets to publish poetry?
Professor, uh, uh, it seems we are not able to listen to you due to network issue. There is a lot of connectivity problems. Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Yeah,
Can
but
you, but your picture
Professor, your voice is breaking.
what the lecture has been released
Yes. I think yes. I'll like there are some questions. I'll ask them to get in touch with you, and you respond to them personally. Okay.
come to my website is lakshmirajsharma.com. So if there
Yes,
some
yes.
queries there, all right.
Sure. I'll let them know. Okay. Bye bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, sir. I now invite Aryapatriti for the formal vote of thanks.
Thank you, Vatsaki. A very good afternoon, everyone. I, on behalf of Intersections B.H.U, extend a very sincere vote of thanks to all who have helped us in making this lecture such a great success. First and foremost, I would like to express our deep sense of gratitude to our chief speaker, Professor Lakshmi Raj Sharma sir, for having very graciously consented to participate in this event despite his busy schedule. Thank you, sir, for your thought-provoking talk on creative writing. Your content today would echo in our minds for a long time to come. Thank you, sir. We express our gratitude to Dr. Vivek Singh, sir, for motivating and inspiring us in all possible ways. Thank you, sir. A special vote of thanks to everyone here for gracing this online platform with their presence. Once again, I thank one and all present here. Thank you.